My sister smirked while cutting the cake I paid for and announced that my own mother thought I only got my promotion out of pity. My whole family laughed at me, so I gathered my things and walked out of the party I was hosting. That one quiet act of self-respect would end up costing them everything, and they never saw it coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The crystal wine glasses, the ones I'd bought just for this occasion, seemed to ring with the sound of their laughter. It was a sharp, ugly sound that cut right through the expensive, celebratory atmosphere I had so carefully curated. I stood frozen in the dining room of my new apartment, the silver cake knife heavy in my sister Chloe's hand. The cake itself, a 4-layer masterpiece from the best bakery in the city, sat on the marble countertop, a monument to an achievement they were all currently mocking. My achievement. Mom says you only got that promotion because your new boss feels sorry for you, Chloe said again, her voice laced with that familiar saccharine venom. She didn't just say it, she announced it, projecting to my parents, my aunt, and her own husband, Mark. And they laughed. It wasn't a nervous titter. It was a full-throated, hearty laugh. My father, Richard, let out a booming chuckle and slapped his knee. My mother, Brenda, covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking, but her eyes, bright and cruel, met mine. She didn't deny it. She was in on the joke. Mark, my brother-in-law, just shook his head with a smug grin as if this confirmed something he'd long suspected. I was 42 years old. I was the new vice president of supply chain management at a major industrial materials firm. I had just closed on this apartment, the first home I'd ever owned, after 2 decades of 60-hour weeks, skipped vacations, and a level of dedication that had cost me relationships, sleep, and peace of mind. I had invited my family here to celebrate with me. I had cooked for 2 days. I had paid for the wine, the catered appetizers, and the ridiculously expensive cake. And they were laughing because my mother, the woman I'd mortgaged my own savings to help refinance her house 10 years ago, had told my sister that my life's work was the result of pity. The blood drained from my face. I could feel it go, leaving my skin cold and clammy. I was in a state of sudden, shocking crisis. It wasn't just the comment, it was the unanimity of the response. It was the realization that this wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was what they said about me when I wasn't in the room. This was what they truly thought. All my life, I had been good old Eliza. Reliable Eliza. The one who co-signed for cars. The one who paid for family dinners. The one who'd funded Chloe's business idea that vanished in a puff of designer handbags. I was the stable, boring, dependable daughter, and she was the bright, charming, golden child who had married Mark and was living the exciting life of an entrepreneur's wife. I looked at Chloe's perfectly manicured hand on the knife, a knife I had bought. I looked at the cake I had paid for. I looked at my mother, who was wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. Something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. It turned into a cold, hard, quiet dust. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't make a scene. That's what Chloe would have done, and it would have given them the satisfaction of calling me dramatic or too sensitive. Instead, I took a very quiet, very deep breath. I let the laughter wash over me one last time, branding the sound of it onto my memory. Then I smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was the smile you give a stranger who bumps into you. It was a mask of polite detachment. "You know," I said, my voice surprisingly even, "you might be right." The laughter sputtered out, replaced by a confused silence. They had expected tears or rage. They were not prepared for agreement. I walked over to the small table by the door where my purse and keys sat. I picked them up. I slipped my phone out of my purse, glanced at the screen as if an urgent message had just arrived, and then put it back. "Eliza, what are you doing?" my mother asked, her tone shifting from amusement to annoyance. "You've all given me a lot to think about," I said, walking to the front door. "And I'm suddenly very tired. Please enjoy the cake. I'm afraid I have to leave." Leave, Chloe scoffed, lowering the knife. Eliza, you live here. This is your party. It was, I corrected her gently, opening the door. But it's not anymore. Please lock up when you're done. Just leave the key on the counter. I stepped out into the hallway and pulled the door closed, muffling their immediate, indignant protests. I didn't wait for the elevator. I walked down the Roman 9 flights of stairs, my footsteps echoing in the pristine silence. By the time I reached the lobby, my hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than it had been in 20 years. The betrayal was worse than any insult. It was a comprehensive rejection of my entire life, and it had been delivered by my entire family. The drive to nowhere was automatic. I had no destination, so my hands, acting on muscle memory, simply steered me onto the highway, away from the city lights and toward the dark, quiet suburbs. My phone, still in my purse on the passenger seat, began to buzz. And buzz, and buzz. I didn't need to look at it. I knew what the messages would say. First would be the confusion, "Where did you go?" Then the indignation, "You ruined the party, Eliza." Then the gaslighting, "It was just a joke. You're always so sensitive. Mom didn't mean it like that." They were wrong. My mother had meant exactly like that, and it wasn't a joke. It was the truth, or at least their truth. I pulled into a dark, empty parking lot at a closed community park. I turned off the engine, and the silence was absolute. I was 42, a vice president, a homeowner, and I was completely, utterly alone. The hollow-chested feeling I'd held back in the apartment finally consumed me. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, but the tears still wouldn't come. It was a coldness, a profound emotional emptiness that went deeper than simple sadness. I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn their respect. I thought this promotion, this apartment, this proof of my success would finally be the thing that made them see me. Instead, it had only given them a new, shinier target to mock. Pity. The word echoed. Did they think my old boss, Mr. Henderson, a man who had been my mentor for 15 years, had given me opportunities out of charity? He was a kind man, yes, but he was a brutal negotiator. He didn't do pity. And my new boss, Mr. Harrison, the man who'd actually given me the VP stripes? Harrison was a shark. He was all numbers and results. The man wouldn't pity his own grandmother if she missed a quarterly target. He had promoted me because I was, in his words, the only person in this company who actually knows where every single one of our assets is. I had earned my position. I had earned it with late nights, with logistics nightmares I'd solved at 3 a.m. from a hotel room, with contracts I'd renegotiated to save the company millions. My family didn't see that. They saw good old Eliza, the boring workhorse, and they saw Chloe, the sparkling, exciting one who had married Mark. Mark, the visionary who had started his own company, Tech Industries. And that's when it clicked. Like a tumbler falling into place in a high-security lock, a single, cold, hard fact settled into my mind. Tech Industries, Mark's company, the company that manufactured custom-molded plastics for high-end electronics. And what did Tech Industries need to make its products? It needed a very specific, patented, industrial-grade polymer resin. A resin that was manufactured by exactly one company in all of North America. My company. I sat up, my back straightening. The emotional fog began to clear, replaced by the sharp, analytical focus that I was paid so well for. Years ago, when Mark was just getting started, he had come to me desperate. He had the clients, but he couldn't secure a stable supply of the R77 resin. He was too small, too new. I, a mid-level manager at the time, had gone to my old boss, Mr. Henderson. As a personal favor, a family favor, Henderson had allowed me to get Mark a legacy contract. It gave him a staggering 40% discount and a rolling line of credit, terms that were absolutely unheard of for a new vendor. It was a favor I had cashed in, and one that had made Mark's business possible. I had set up the account. I had managed the relationship. And for the past 8 years, I had let it run, a quiet little engine of family subsidy that I never mentioned. They had laughed at my pity promotion. I started the car, the engine's quiet thrum a counterpoint to the sudden, rapid beating of my heart. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove back to my empty apartment. The leftover food, the half-eaten appetizers, the abandoned glasses, I didn't see them. I walked straight to my home office and opened my work briefcase. I pulled out my laptop. As I logged into the secure company portal, my phone buzzed on the desk. A new text from Chloe. "Mom is in tears, I hope you're happy. This was so selfish of you." I looked at the text. Then I looked at the MTech Industries client file loading on my screen. They had all been laughing, so comfortable in their assumption that I was just the family doormat. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who I was on Monday morning. To understand the laughter, you have to understand my family's ecosystem. It was built on a simple, unspoken rule: Chloe receive. Ed and I provided. This dynamic was established before I could even spell logistics. Chloe was the sunshine. She was pretty, she was charming, and she had a way of making you feel like the most important person in the world right before she asked you for something. My parents, Brenda and Richard, were orbiting planets, basking in her glow. She failed a class, the teacher was jealous. She got a speeding ticket, the officer was unfair. I, on the other hand, was the rock. Solid, dependable, and completely taken for granted. I got straight A's, and my parents would nod and ask me to help Chloe with her homework. I won a state scholarship, and my mother used the money I saved on tuition to remodel her kitchen. I was praised not for my achievements, but for my utility. "Eliza is so responsible," they'd say, which was code for, "Eliza will handle it." And I did. I handled everything. I paid for my own college, then chipped in for Chloe's business degree, which she abandoned after 2 semesters to find herself on a trip to Europe that I largely subsidized. When our parents' adjustable-rate mortgage ballooned, I was the one who liquidated my 401k to help them refinance, putting my own name on the loan as a co-signer. Then came Mark. Mark was in many ways a male version of Chloe. He had boundless confidence, a dazzling smile, and a big idea that was always just one infusion of cash away from changing the world. When Chloe brought him home, my parents were enchanted. He wasn't a boring 9-to-5 guy like the accountants and engineers I'd dated. He was an entrepreneur. His company, MTech Industries, was his big dream. He'd identified a niche market for bespoke plastic components. The only problem was that his entire business model depended on the R77 resin. It was our company's flagship product, incredibly durable, heat-resistant, and notoriously difficult to source. Our order books were filled by aerospace, medical, and defense contractors. Mark couldn't even get a call back. I still remember the dinner. Chloe had wept, actual tears streaming down her face. "He just needs a chance, Eliza. If he can't get the resin, his business will fail before it starts. We'll be ruined." My mother put her hand on my arm. "Eliza, you work there, you know people. Can't you do something for your sister?" So good old Eliza did something. I went to my boss, Mr. Henderson, and I begged. I cashed in every bit of goodwill I had. Henderson, a man from an older generation who valued family loyalty, sighed and agreed. He put MTech on a legacy contract, the kind reserved for 50-year-old clients. A 40% discount, no minimum order, and a 120-day net. Mark's business didn't just survive, it boomed. He was the sole supplier for 3 different tech startups, all because I had given him a monopoly on the supply chain. And how did they repay me? They treated my career as a boring little office job, a stark contrast to Mark's high-stakes world of business ownership. They didn't understand that Mark's world existed because of my boring job. Chloe took on the title of business manager at MTech, which seemed to mostly involve posting photos of their new boat on social media, captioned "Boss Life." The more successful Mark became, the more entitled they grew. My contributions to the family were no longer appreciated, they were expected. The party, my promotion, it was a threat to their narrative. My promotion wasn't pity. It was power, real, corporate, verifiable power. And by laughing, they had signaled that they were not only ungrateful, but they were also, quite frankly, stupid. They had insulted the very person who held the single thread that kept their entire charade from unraveling. The file on my computer screen glowed in the dark of my apartment. It was 2 a.m. on Sunday. I had all the access I needed. I wasn't just a VP. I was the VP who had built the system, and I was about to conduct my first official audit. Monday morning, 8:00 a.m. I walked into my new office. The plaque on the door, Eliza Vance, Vice President, gleamed. It felt different than it had on Friday. It felt less like a celebration and more like a suit of armor. My new boss, Mr. Harrison, had been explicit during my promotion interview. "Vance," he'd said, his voice clipped and precise, "Henderson was too sentimental. He left a dozen legacy accounts on the books that are bleeding us dry with sweetheart deals. Your first task as VP is to clean house. Audit every account under $10 million. Bring them in line with 2025 pricing or cut them. You have my full authority. No exceptions." He had given me a mandate, a weapon, and my own family had just told me exactly where to aim it. This wasn't just revenge. This was my job. I didn't go into the MTech file myself. That wouldn't be clean. Instead, I called in David, my new department's sharpest auditor. He was a quiet, no-nonsense man in his 30s who lived for spreadsheets. "David," I said, sliding a piece of paper with MTech Industries written on it across my desk. "I'm starting the legacy audit Mr. Harrison requested. I want you to pull this one first. Give me the full workup, contract terms, pricing, and payment history. I want to know everything." "Right away, Ms. Vance," he said, taking the paper. I spent the next 2 hours on a conference call with our German logistics team, the knot in my stomach slowly tightening. I wasn't a vindictive person. I was a problem solver. But this felt like a tumor I'd ignored for a decade, and I was finally about to excise it. At 10:30 a.m., David knocked on my door. He wasn't holding a simple printout. He was holding a thick binder, and his face was pale. "Ms. Vance," he said, closing the door behind him, "you need to see this." He laid the binder on my desk. "First," he said, "the contract. It's from 8 years ago, signed by Mr. Henderson. It gives MTech a 40% discount on R77 resin. That's below our current production cost. We are actively losing money, a lot of money, on every single order." "I was afraid of that," I said, my voice cold. "That's what Harrison wants us to fix. What else?" David flipped a few pages. "The payment history. They've been on a 120-day net, which is already dangerously generous. But Ms. Vance, they're not paying." "What do you mean?" "They are 148 days past due on their last 3 invoices. Total outstanding balance is $281,450.22. I stared at the number, over $250,000, while they were laughing at me, while I was paying for their cake. "How is this possible?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Why wasn't this flagged to my predecessor? Why wasn't it flagged to me?" This was the clever trap I had been sensing, and David was the one to spring it. "That's the part you really need to see," he said, his voice dropping. He turned to the back of the binder. "The account has been repeatedly flagged by our automated system, but someone has been manually overriding the collection process." He pointed to a call log from our accounting department. "Our collections team has reached out 5 times. Each time, they were told to stand down. 3 of those times, the collections agent noted they received a call from your office." "From my office?" "Specifically," David said, pointing to the log, "the agent noted the call was from Eliza Vance, authorizing a family grace period due to internal restructuring." I looked at the dates. The calls had happened over the last 6 months. They were lies, all of them. I had never made those calls. "Chloe." It had to be Chloe. Using my name, pretending to be me, to stop collections on her husband's delinquent account. She was impersonating a corporate officer. She was committing fraud. The room went very quiet. The casual, cruel disrespect at the party had just escalated into a serious corporate crime. I looked up at David. My face was granite. The last shred of good old Eliza vanished. "David," I said, my voice pure ice. "You've done excellent work. Here is what you are to do now. Draft 2 letters. The first is a formal, non-negotiable demand for payment in full of the $281,450.22 due within 24 business hours. The second is a notice of immediate contract termination, citing breach of payment terms and fraudulent activity. Both letters are to be sent via courier and email to MTech's legal and financial contacts. Use my digital signature. Send them. Now." "Yes, Ms. Vance," David said. He recognized the look in my eyes. It was the look that got me the promotion. He gathered the binder and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I was left alone in the silence, staring at the phone on my desk. The trap was set. It was no longer a matter of if it would spring. It was only a matter of when. The when was 45 minutes. It's amazing how fast bad news travels when $250,000 is on the line. My desk phone, the one with the direct VP line, lit up with a number I didn't recognize but knew instantly. MTech Industries. I let it ring 3 times, took a sip of water, and answered. "Eliza Vance." "Eliza, what is this? What did you do?" It wasn't Chloe, it was Mark, and he wasn't begging, he was furious. The arrogant, smug man from the party was roaring through the receiver. "Mark," I said, my voice perfectly calm and professional. I motioned for my assistant, Sarah, who sat just outside my glass office, to start recording the call, a standard procedure for any hostile vendor. "This is Ms. Vance, VP of Supply Chain. To whom am I speaking?" "Don't you Ms. Vance me, Eliza. This is Mark. You just shut down my entire company. This email. It's a mistake. You have to call it off. You have to tell them it's a mistake." "There is no mistake, Mark," I said, clicking my pen. "I am looking at the MTech account file right now. You are 148 days past due on payments totaling over $281,000. As per the terms of your contract, which you breached, we have moved to terminate." There was a sputtering sound on the other end. We had an arrangement, we had an extension, Chloe handled it. "Ah, yes, the extension," I said. This was the first reveal. "I've seen the notes on that. It seems my accounting department was under the impression that I had personally authorized a grace period for you." Mark's bluster faltered. Yes, exactly. Chloe talked to you. You said it was fine." "No, Mark, she didn't talk to me," I said, my voice as sharp and cold as a razor. "She talked to a collections agent, claimed she was me, and fraudulently misrepresented my position to delay payment. What you call handling it, my legal team calls wire fraud." Dead silence. The only sound was his breathing, suddenly shallow and fast. He had walked right into it. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his fury collapsing into panic. "You don't? Then let's stick to the facts you do know," I countered. "The 40% discount Mr. Henderson gave you 8 years ago was a personal favor. It was never authorized by corporate. As of my promotion, that unauthorized discount is void. And even if it weren't, your non-payment has nullified the entire agreement. You are no longer a client. You are a debtor." "Eliza, please," he whispered, the name a plea instead of an accusation. "You can't do this. It's me. It's family. This will ruin me. Is this about the party? You're really this petty over a joke?" "The party?" I almost laughed, but it was a cold, humorless sound. "The party was just a reminder of who you all think I am. This, Mark, is a reminder of who I actually am. This is Ms. Vance doing her job. You have 24 hours to remit payment, or this file moves from my desk to our external collections agency and our legal department. They are not as sentimental as you seem to think I am." You wouldn't," he threatened, but it was weak. "Try me, have your lawyer contact ours. Goodbye, Mark." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel joy. I felt balanced. The scales, after a lifetime of being tipped against me, were finally level. My phone immediately lit up again. This time, it was my personal cell. The caller ID read, CHLOE. I looked at the vibrating phone on my desk. I watched her name flash again and again. She was screaming into my voicemail, I had no doubt. She was threatening, crying, and insulting me. I pressed the silence button and went back to my email. I had real work to do. The next 24 hours were a storm. Mark and Chloe, realizing I was no longer good old Eliza, pivoted to their other tactic, sixing our parents on me. My mother, Brenda, began the assault. She left a string of increasingly hysterical voicemails. They started with guilt. Eliza, your sister is in tears. I don't know what you did, but you need to fix it. This is not how we raised you. When I didn't respond, they escalated to threats. Your father is a very powerful man. He will call your boss. This was, of course, laughable. My father was a regional insurance manager. My boss, Harrison, ate men like my father for breakfast. When the calls and texts failed, they escalated again. They showed up. I was in a meeting with the logistics team when my assistant, Sarah, buzzed my intercom. Her voice was strained. Ms. Vance, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a Brenda and a Richard Vance in the lobby. They say they're your parents. They're causing a scene. They're demanding to see you. I closed my eyes for a single, weary second. Thank you, Sarah. Have security escort them to conference room B. Do not let them on this floor. Get 2 guards and have them wait outside the conference room door. I'll be there in 5 minutes. I collected my tablet. This was no longer a personal matter. They had brought this to my place of business. They were a security threat. I walked into conference room B. My parents were standing in the middle of the room, looking small and out of place against the gleaming chrome and black leather. My mother's face was red and splotchy from crying. My father just looked furious. Eliza, my mother shrieked the moment I walked in. Thank goodness. Tell these guards to leave. What is this? What are you doing to your sister? I held up a hand. The gesture was so sudden and authoritative that she actually stopped talking. Sit down, I said. It wasn't a request. They sat, shocked. I remained standing at the head of the table. You are in my place of business, I said, my voice low and devoid of all emotion. You are here under false pretenses, having caused a disturbance in my lobby. This meeting will be short, and it will be the last one we have on this property. What do you want? We want you to stop, my father blustered. You're tearing this family apart. You're ruining your sister. It's money. It's just money. It is just money, I agreed. It's $281,450 and 22 cents that your daughter and son-in-law stole from my company. They didn't steal, my mother cried. It's a misunderstanding. Is it? I tapped my tablet. The screen came to life. While you were at my party, laughing about my pity promotion, I was made aware of some facts. I put the tablet on the table and turned it to face them. Fact 1, M-Tech's contract, which I secured, was losing my company money on every order. Fact 2, M-Tech is 148 days past due on its invoices. And fact 3, the most important fact, your daughter, Chloe, has been repeatedly calling my accounting department, impersonating me, to fraudulently stop collections. I played the audio file. The conference room's high-fidelity speakers filled with Chloe's voice, sickly sweet and full of fake authority. Hi, this is Eliza Vance from the VP's office. Yes, about M-Tech. We're doing some family restructuring. Just put a grace period on that account, will you? Thanks so much. My mother's face went white. My father's jaw went slack. The proof, irrefutable and cold, hung in the air. That, I said, stopping the recording, is a felony. It's called wire fraud, and it carries a hefty prison sentence. You wouldn't, my mother whispered, her eyes wide with genuine fear. I haven't, I corrected her. My boss, Mr. Harrison, was very clear. He wanted me to file a police report immediately. He was also clear that M-Tech is to be blacklisted from our supplier database permanently. I convinced him to hold off on the police report as a family favor. I let that sink in. I had used my power not to destroy them, but to save them from their own criminality. But the contract is terminated. The debt is due. That is non-negotiable. My career, which you find so amusing, is on the line. I will not be committing fraud with her. My mother started to sob, a desperate, grasping sound. Eliza, please, she's your sister, you'll destroy them, they'll lose their house. Their house, I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. The house that was built on an unauthorized 40% discount, the cars they drive, the boat Mark bought last summer, all of it was purchased with money that belonged to my company. It wasn't their money. It was ours, and I am taking it back. This pity promotion gave me the authority to do it. I walked to the door and opened it. The 2 security guards stood at attention. This conversation is over, I said. The debt is due. If I hear from any of you again, not Mark, not Chloe, not you, this audio file goes directly to the district attorney. Do you understand me? My father just nodded, his face ashen. My mother couldn't even look at me. Security will show you out, I said. I walked out of the conference room and didn't look back. The next week was quiet. The 24-hour deadline passed. The 48-hour deadline passed. No payment. As promised, the file was transferred to our external collections agency, a ruthless firm that specialized in corporate asset recovery. I heard nothing. The silence from my family was absolute. No angry texts, no tearful voicemails. It was as if I had ceased to exist. Through a mutual acquaintance, I heard that Mark was scrambling, trying to find another supplier for tea. He R77 resin. He couldn't, it was our patent. His production lines were dead. Then, exactly 1 week after I had my parents escorted from my office, I received an email. It was from my mother. Subject, we need to talk. The email was short. She wanted a family meeting at their house. We need to talk things out as a family. No lawyers, no yelling, just us. Please, Eliza, we need to find a way to fix this. They thought they could get me on their home turf. They thought good old Eliza was still in there somewhere, buried under the Ms. Vance persona. They thought they could ambush me, surround me, and emotionally blackmail me into submission. I replied with 2 words, what time? I arrived at my parents' house at 7 p.m. on Saturday, the house I had helped them keep. I walked in, and they were all there, just as I'd expected. My parents, Chloe, and Mark, all sitting in the living room. It was set up like an intervention. Chloe's eyes were puffy and red. Mark looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a gray, desperate pallor. Eliza, thank you for coming, my mother began, her voice trembling. Can I get you some tea? No, thank you, I said, remaining standing. I didn't even take off my coat. I'm not staying. You wanted to talk, talk. It was Chloe who finally broke. The tears were real this time. Eliza, please, she sobbed, standing up. You have to help us. You've made your point. You're powerful. We get it. You've won. Please, just call them off. Tell your boss to give us the contract back. We'll pay. We'll work out a payment plan. Please. Mark stood beside her, his hand on her back. She's right, Eliza. We're family. I'm sorry about the party, about everything. It was stupid. But this is my life, my company. You're destroying us. My parents chimed in. She's your only sister, my father said, his voice pleading. You can't do this to her. I listened. I let them empty themselves of all their excuses, all their pleas, all their belated, desperate apologies. I let the silence draw out, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, I spoke. I did talk to my boss, I said quietly. Chloe's head snapped up, a pathetic flicker of hope in her eyes. And, what did he say? I gave him the full report, I continued, as if I were giving a quarterly update. I gave him the audit file from David. I gave him the delinquent invoices. And I gave him the audio recording of you committing fraud. Chloe flinched as if I'd struck her. He was impressed, I said. He thanked me for identifying a high-risk, non-profitable, and fraudulent account. He said, "Good work, Vance. You just saved this company $500,000 a year." He also asked me, for a second time, if I wanted to press charges against you, Chloe. My mother let out a small gasp. I told him no, I said, looking directly at my sister. I told him I would not be responsible for sending my sister to jail. I told him that was the one and only family favor I had left to give. So it's okay, Chloe whispered. He'll give us the contract back. I almost felt a pang of pity. They still didn't get it. They thought this was a game. No, Chloe, I said. It's not okay. In exchange for my generosity in not having you arrested, I had to promise my boss that Tech Industries would be permanently blacklisted from our supplier database. It's not my decision anymore. It's a corporate directive. My career, the one you all mocked, is now tied to never doing business with you again. I turned to Mark. It's over. You can't get the resin. Your company is finished. The finality of it hit them. Mark sank into his chair. Chloe just stared at me, her mouth open, the sobs choked in her throat. But we're family, my mother whispered, echoing the old, tired refrain. We can talk this out. We just did, I said. I looked at each of them one last time, the 4 people who were supposed to be my safe harbor. You didn't think I earned my promotion. You thought I got it out of pity, but you were right about one thing. My old boss, Mr. Henderson, did feel pity. He pitied Mark, so he gave him a contract. And that one act of pity is what allowed you to build a life you didn't earn. I walked to the front door. My new boss, Mr. Harrison, he doesn't do pity, and as it turns out, neither do I. I opened the door and walked out into the cool night air, leaving the ruins of their lives, and my old one, behind me. The downfall was not cinematic. It was a quiet, administrative collapse. Tech Industries filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 2 weeks later. Without the R77 resin, their production lines were worthless, and their clients had already moved on. The collections agency seized what assets they could, which was very little. The boat, the cars, all leased. The house, I learned, was mortgaged to the hilt. My family, as I had known it, ceased to exist. My parents tried to call a few Ray times. The messages were no longer angry, they were pathetic, filled with a bewildered sense of victimhood. How could you let this happen? My mother's voice quavered in a voicemail. Your sister is working as a receptionist. Mark is at a car dealership. They're living in a tiny apartment. I hope you're happy, Eliza. I didn't reply, I just blocked their numbers, all of them. The reconciliation I'd always craved never came, but what I got instead was something far more valuable. Peace. The silence they left in my life was staggering. There were no more passive-aggressive digs at Sunday dinner. No more emergency phone calls that required my credit card. No more gnawing, constant feeling of being undervalued and used. I used the money I was no longer funneling into their lives to live. I took a real vacation, a trip to Italy for 3 weeks. I reconnected with old friends who were happy for my success. I excelled at my job. At the end of the year, Mr. Harrison gave me a massive bonus. For your professionalism and decisive action in optimizing the legacy portfolio, the memo read. I had spent my whole life being the rock for people who only ever wanted to stand on me to get a better view. By walking away, I had finally taken the rock for myself and started building my own foundation. The resolution was not about them, it was about me. I did see them one last time about a year later. I was sitting at an outdoor cafe on a bright Saturday morning, reading a book. I looked up and they were walking down the street, my parents, Chloe and Mark. They looked ordinary, deflated. Chloe wasn't wearing designer clothes. Mark's visionary spark was gone. They looked tired. My mother saw me. Her face lit up with a complicated, strained hope. She grabbed my father's arm and started to walk toward my table. I didn't smile, I didn't scowl. I simply looked at her, and as she approached, I raised my hand. It wasn't a wave. It was a stop gesture, a simple, polite, and unbreachable boundary. She froze, her face crumbled. She understood. There was no talking it out. There was nothing left to say. I put a $20 bill on the table, picked up my book, and walked away. I got into the car I had paid for and drove to the apartment I had earned, secure in the knowledge that I was finally, completely, and irrevocably free.